Alright, so this latest chapter of Black Clover was a painful one. Not in the sense of it being a bad read or unenjoyable, as it was quite the contrary, but in terms of just how demoralizing it was for our various characters. With the previous chapter, we had the furtherance of Noelle versus Vonica, the rematch to decide it all. And Noelle was clearly dominating as she'd managed to pierce Vonica in the stomach and deal some major damage. And try as she might, Vonica was completely overwhelmed and domineered in this fight. But even still, as expected of the character, she was loving every moment of it. Noelle was not letting up at all and ultimately would manage to pin Vonica and achieve victory. This provided Vonica with a wonderful sensation she'd consider to perhaps be friendship, a point that Noelle would completely dismiss as she wanted nothing to do with Vonica and actually intended to kill her outright. But just then, this situation would be interrupted by the emergence of another presence. They speak of Lucifero and the other high-ranking devils being unaware of their toilings, that their complete emergence was drawing ever closer. This entity then being revealed to be none other than the mother of curses, Megecula herself. She would express regrets towards having to sacrifice such a useful vessel like Vonica, but in the end, such a thing in tandem with the sacrifice of Lolopechka was a necessity for her emergence, and so it could not be helped. And because of this, we would also see an altered Lolopechka. But before her true emergence, Megecula intended to have them all fight it out one last time as to avoid suffering lonely deaths. With this latest chapter, we would pick up right from there, as Noelle would be left to wonder how Megecula could have possibly manifested. A reasonable question considering only the first gate of the underworld had been opened thus far. Now in regards to that, the Dark Triad may have run into a bit of an issue here, seeing as Dante has now been defeated. For the sake of proper progression, all three of them need to be present, but as far as we know, Jack was able to deliver the finishing blow on Dante following his defeat at the hands of Magna. A conclusion for the character I am willing to accept as reality, as to do otherwise wouldn't be very satisfying for readers and pretty much like beating a dead horse at this point. With that being said, I don't believe that in Nott's initial summation of the plan, Morris was accounted for at all. Meanwhile, the guy has managed to expedite the progression of the tree tremendously, and as it turns out, also possesses the power of an undisclosed devil. So perhaps even with the loss of Dante, the tree's progression will be able to continue on. Which makes a whole lot of sense considering Morris was not concerned with the fall of Dante at all. In fact, his greatest bit of intrigue expressed to this point was the question of what sort of magic was able to take him down. With that being said, Lucifero is a very important inclusion to all of this, considering his historical connection to our main character, Asta, and his devil, Libe. So we will no doubt have to deal with him in some capacity, even without Dante. Additionally, the devilish marks on Morris's face are eerily similar to those of Dante, but even still, for as powerful as Lucifero may be, I don't believe that he's possessing more than one host, which therefore leads me to believe that the devil possessing Morris is in fact Lucifugus, a largely mysterious high-ranking devil that clearly possesses a similar name to the aforementioned Lucifero. And if you don't remember, Lucifugus is the very devil responsible for the slaughter of Nott's entire family. So to not have him involved in all this, yet be name dropped like that, would be a bit odd. Not to mention that in Western esotericism, the concept of Lucifugus and the Tree of Qliphoth are especially connected to one another. But yeah, Megecula would explain that although she may use the gates of the underworld as a sort of backup plan, she seriously prefers to manifest by way of her cursed magic instead. That being said, this specific brand of magic required a great deal of time and effort to locate and accumulate the sacrifices necessary. Now the specific name of this magic, Curse Warding Magic, Evil Goddess's Curse, is a very fascinating one. The very notion of goddom being more than worth a bit of intrigue. Because more than likely, if the specification of evil in this instance is required, one may imply that a good version of the divine may yet exist. And although there isn't much yet to substantiate such a possibility, in considering the general story structure of such mythology, perhaps Megecula was once a goddess indeed, but the first to ever suffer a curse and be cast out by her kin, damned to her now fiendish position. Megecula would speak firstly of Ashir Silva, Noelle's mother being the first worthy sacrifice to be killed by her curse, thus allowing her to partially manifest through Vanaka's body. Next, she would speak of Vanaka, who she would regard as a prodigy of a host deserving of being contracted by a supreme devil such as herself. But because Vanaka is now in the midst of dying, Megecula is able to now emerge in this imperfected state. Then lastly, there is of course the Queen of the Heart Kingdom, Lolopechka. And once these remaining two die, Megecula will officially manifest into this world in her completed state. Now from this, a question does emerge. Why did it take so long for this spell to be ready for execution? Well, from what I can assume, each of these three souls provided some form of merit different from all the others. With Ashier, we had strength, not exclusively to her magic, as I imagine that was a requirement of all of them, but strength in her heart and convictions. With Vanaka, we have corruption, an unrelenting desire for carnage and bloodshed, a truly dreadful soul. And lastly, there is Lolopechka, a soul of purity, the typical prerequisite of such horrific rituals. But now speaking of Lolopechka, Megecula, in her control of her, would have her manifest a truly terrifying spell known as Demon Water Magic, Hydra of the Dark Abyss. This of course being a far cry from her typical magic, and so Noelle would question what had been done to her friend, as Megecula would reply that she played around with her curse a bit and turned her into a devil in hopes that it would make for some good memories before her demise. And again, for her to have straight up turned this human woman into a devil says to me that such a thing may be done to other entities as well. A form of damnation I would certainly expect of the divine, and certainly a power worthy of a supposed goddess's possession. I mean, we've heard of other beings be turned into demons and such, but demons and devils in the story of Black Clover are very different things. Demons being completely mindless brutes, and devils being intent on their brutish nature, with a far more methodical and considerate approach. But suffice to say, this all pissed Noelle off greatly, as she would call forth yet another water dragon. But just as she readied herself to commence her assault, her magic would suddenly vanish. This was curse-warding magic, Decaying World. Noelle's magic was nothing to her, as the curses would sprawl out from her body. But just then, Megecula would notice something. A flower bed of roses. It was Charlotte pushing herself well beyond her limitations in an attempt to quell the Supreme Devil's power. Megecula would then admit that Charlotte was in fact the only person to have ever been able to counter her curses, and would subsequently commend her truly magnificent power. While in the midst of this, Rill would emerge, intent on protecting Charlotte as she did her thing. Rill, now trying his best not to be forgotten it seems, would say that Noelle's beautiful magic gave him the inspiration for a new spell. And here we would have it, picture magic, Twilight of Valhalla. And this sure is interesting. You see, Black Clover is a series heavily inspired by Norse mythology and the like, and so to have a depiction of Valhalla here is to me nothing to gloss over. In fact, to accompany our points in connection to the divine, we have a number of angelic warriors or Valkyries present. And truly, if the underworld exists, I don't doubt that the heavens, Valhalla, the Norse heaven for valiant warriors, exists as well. And at that, perhaps this may additionally tie into Asta's fate. Wizard King Julius, upon his return, predicted the demise of Asta on account of his devilish power, among other things. And when it comes to the death of great warriors, well, that sort of thing tends to be reserved for the frontline sword-wielding types, and in that department, Asta is one of very few. So perhaps at some point with one of those main character near-death moments, Asta will receive a bit of plot armor in the form of a trip to Valhalla. Who knows? But at the same time, Megecula would counter with her curse-warding magic, Uncontrolled Slave, as she would completely decimate this entire spell in a moment. And admittedly, perhaps I have decided to place such emphasis on this whole spell because its existence was so short-lived. Rill, Charlotte, and all their magic got bodied in an instant. However, perhaps because they remained in contact with the flowers, they will be able to avoid becoming her slaves. We will just have to wait and see. Now, on the other side of this conflict, Gadja wasn't so focused on Megecula, but rather his queen, Lolopechka. He would use his true lightning magic to evade the grasp of her abyssal hydras and close in on her location, all the while thinking to himself that he had decided to become the strongest attack mage in the entire Heart Kingdom for the sake of wiping out each and every one of their enemies so that he might battle in her stead. And truly, he did have a great opportunity to strike here, but in seeing his once gentle queen in such a state, he could not bring himself to do so. But Devil Olapechka would not hesitate and pierced straight through the body of Gaja. And listen, at this point the situation had clearly gone from bad to worse, and so Noelle would call out to everyone, but just then, she would lose her power. Spirit Dive had been undone. Noelle too would now fall onto this bed of decayed flowers as Megecula would announce their joint failure, and that was the chapter. Oh my goodness, how cruel, man. We did not even get to enjoy Noelle's victory before Megecula decided to pull up and curb stomp everyone's necks. And honestly, the most terrifying thing about all of this is that this is apparently only her at partial power. She hasn't even completely formed, and she is this strong. Good lord. And with that, Black Clover is seriously going crazy right now, guys. So if you want to see more coverage on the channel, you gotta let us know in the comments down below, and let YouTube know that you enjoyed the video by dropping a like, and of course subscribing to Plot Armor with notifications on. And if you would not only like to further the discussion, but also keep up to date with all the latest and greatest anime and manga news, memes, and information, go ahead and follow us at Plot Armor YT over on Twitter and Instagram, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best Black Clover content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.